Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the McKinney, their part number T2714, 4.5, 4.5, and a 10B finish. Let's take a closer look at the hinge. This client ordered 3 of them, and they would be packaged 3 in a box on this hinge. That's what we're looking at. I want you to take special notice of the finish on this hinge. I have seen lots of variations of oil rub bronze, and this is, depending on how you let the light hit this, this is a unique interpretation of oil rub bronze. It looks anywhere from black stainless to, a very light brown bronze finish, depending on how the light hits it. But oil rub bronze is a finish that is, by design, inherently subject to broad interpretation. There is no actual oil rubbed bronze finish that will be the same every time, like there would be for polished stainless or polished brass or satin nickel, depending on the base material. This is steel, by the way. Okay. This is a T2714. It's a part number from the manufacturer. It's a standard weight hinge, which means in a 4.5 inch height, it's 134 thousandths. We'll check that. It's 4.5 by 4.5. 4.5 tall, 4.5 wide. It's important to know that the height is the first dimension on a hinge. Very, very occasionally, someone does, in my estimation, perceive correctly initially that the width would be the first dimension. That's how doors are, but it's not how hinges are. And I will admit that I learned that the hard way. I did a job in the early 90s where we did about 20 doors for the University of Illinois at Chicago. And there were 2 pesky stairwell doors that were 3'6", and the spec clearly called out 5 by 4.5. Well, I prepped them all for 4.5 inch hinges, and I sent them 4.5 by 5s. He says, well, everything fits, but these were supposed to be 5 inch hinges. And I said, yeah, they are. He's like, no. And then I realized at that moment, maybe I don't understand how hinges are sized. And I learned at that moment, the height is the first dimension. And over the years, and certainly of late, I've come to appreciate why the height might be the first dimension. It's really, when you think about a hinge, the more important of the 2 dimensions to know first. I need to know both dimensions, but, I need a starter for a car. Okay, that's great, but give me the model. I mean, give me are we talking Chevy? Are we talking Ford? I've got a Chevy. Great. Now I need a starter for just the logic of the way in which it's doled out, so to speak. I'd like to know the height first, because the height really talks about the weight of the door, the width of the door. It's going to be considered best practice, common in specs for doors over 3 foot wide or 3'6" and wider to have a taller hinge, because a 4.5 to a 5, I've been told that represents about a 20% increase in the hinge's ability to handle the load of the door. So that height first really tells me not only what I should be thinking about, but it tells me, well, how are my doors and frames prepped? A 5 inch is probably not a stock door for many hollow metal manufacturers, whereas 4.5 would be. Anyway, all you have to know is the height is the first dimension. This is a 4.5 by 4.5, and that leaf thickness is indeed, it's good, 0.135. That's really accurate. I've seen them a lot more variation than 1/1000th of an inch. Now, you can do hinges in lots of different sizes. You can do them, this is obviously square, but you can do them rectangular. 4.5 by 4, that's not an uncommon hinge. 5 by 4.5, 4.5 by 7, 6 by 6, 8 by 8, 8 by 6, 4 by 3.5. You can do lots of different sizes on hinges. This happens to be the garden variety for commercial work, 4.5, 4.5. Doesn't mean it's the right hinge, though. In a lot of applications, a 4-inch wide hinge would be better. If you have an application where your frame is capping over the end of the wall like you would on a knockdown drywall application, think of the bathroom of your favorite coffee shop. Well, that's a 4 7/8 metal stud with 5/8 thick rock on either side. You've got a 4 7/8 thick wall. You're going to use a frame with a 4 7/8 throat. That door can go to 90. It will probably go even further depending on how and where the closer is located and how it's templated. But a 4-inch wide hinge, a 4-inch wide would be better for that application because there's no reason to have that extra offset from the center of the door, that 1/4 inch. It's not going to kill anything, but a 4-inch would be a better hinge. It brings that vertical axis of pivoting closer to the center of the door, making it more efficient. That would be the better way to go. Now, if you're butting the frame like a 5 3/4 frame up to 8-inch CMU, a 4-inch, if you're going to 90 degree, it'll certainly work. But now you have to start to think, what degree of opening do I want? And what hinge width do I need to achieve that? That you'll have to figure out, which is not hard to figure out, in fact. The dimension for the formula for determining the width of a hinge is simply this. The door thickness minus the hinge back set times 2 plus the clearance and plus the inset. So the door thickness is easy. The hinge back set is that part of the door that's not been mortised or chiseled or prepped for the hinge. Very commonly in an 1 3/4 thick door, almost exclusively I would think, you'll have a 1/4 inch back set. So 1 3/4 minus a 1/4 times 2 is 3 inch. Then the inset, what I had said latter, is the dimension from the face of the frame to the face of the door. It's going to be less than 1/8 of an inch in typical instances. It could be 0. It could be 6 inch. It could be anything, but it's probably going to be it's either going to be about 3/32 of an inch or it's going to be 0 in most cases. Your clearance is the dimension from the face of the trim or the wall, the greatest projecting part of that permanent structure, to the door when the door is brought to 180 degrees. How much room do you need to allow in there? That can usually be 0 because you're doing that drywall frame style, or it could be 1 inch, or it could be 12 inch. It could be lots of things, but that would be how to do it. Door thickness minus hinge back set times 2 plus clearance plus inset. Go to the next largest size, and that would be the width of the hinge that you need. Now let's just go over this a couple more items. The location of the holes is what's called the template pattern. We're going to look at a document in a moment called the template, but if we were to say that I need a door and frame prepped for hinges to the template pattern, it would be exactly where the dimensions lie for these hole locations. This is the template location. Screws are included in a complementary finish. The T2714 is a plain bearing hinge. As you can see, there are no bearing packets. This would be very appropriate for, I think this is going to a residential application. This would be very appropriate for a very low volume use, very low volume. I would order a TA2714. It will be it'll be much more capable of producing a lower friction coefficient between the knuckles. If you have a residential application, this could be an attached garage. It could be the wrong hinge. If that door is fire rated, you need to have ball bearings or a bearing type construction. So it could be the wrong hinge. So be mindful. I'm an advocate of ball bearing hinges in all instances, unless, of course, cost is the most important thing and long-term health of the door and frame are not important. It may not be an issue year one, but I guarantee you, even a moderate use door in a home, at 20 years, that hinge is going to be substantially worn, if not sooner. A coat closet, door to the garage, obviously, door to the basement, those sorts of open all the time, open and close doors. The problem with the knuckles and those spaces wearing out is the door is going to sag and tip forward, and now the door doesn't latch very well. So let's take a closer look at the supporting documentation by switching to the screen view. Okay, let's take a look at this hinge. We've got a T2714, 4.5 by 4.5, 10B, full mortise hinge, standard weight, 5 knuckle, square corner, oil rub bronze finish. It's a full mortise hinge because when you bring these leaves together, there's a great picture of it right here, they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame, so you have that typical margin between the door and the frame, which is generally about You know, I think they swag those leaves so that there's about a 1/16 of an inch there. You know, is generally what they're doing there. Full mortise hinge, oil rubbed, 4.5, 4.5, made of steel. This 7 in the part number means steel. It's a 5-knuckle hinge, as does the rest of the part number. There are 8 holes in it, as we just took note of. Screws are included. By all means, indicate in the comment field. We also said that it was 134,000 square corner plain bearing. We talked about that, and that it's standard weight. 134 and standard weight go together when it's 4.5 inch tall. As the height changes, so will the leaf thickness. For use in common flush door frame wall application, the full mortise plain bearing hinge is recommended for low frequency doors. Specifications of product, blah, blah, blah. Okay, when you buy one, we're going to ship you one. They're priced per hinge. Let's tear into these different supporting documents. Let's look at the catalog page first. Very handy document. It's going to show you the 2 hinges that would fit on this. The steel-based hinge and the non-ferrous-based hinge. The T2714 would be a stainless. Okay. So they do not have a brass or bronze-based material of this. You probably need to get to a TA2314 or a TB2314 for that. Shows you all the sizes that they will do a standard weight hinge on. Pretty typical. I'm surprised to not see a 4.5 by 4. And frankly, I'm surprised to see larger hinges. You know, if you're dealing with larger hinges, you're dealing with heavier doors or thicker doors, or both. So I would think that that's unusual. Options are here. Non-removable pin, pretty common if you have an exterior door that swings out, or any door that you want to work tremendously towards deterring a person's ability to drive that pin out. You're going to want non-removable pin. You can certainly do radiused corner. Residential applications, 1/4 inch radius, are not unheard of. I generally see those more in 4 by 4 hinges, however. Hospital tip, that is where they're going to take this, if this hinge was closed, and they're going to grind that down so that you can't loop something on top of the hinge. The point is that it will slip off, making it ligature resistant. I wouldn't really expect to see hospital tips in plain bearing hinges. Ball tip, sure, residential applications. Decorative tips, ball or steeple. SSF, safety stud feature, that's when there's going to be a large disc that's attached to one leaf, and then there will be a hole in the other side, so that when it closes, that disc is protruding into that other leaf. You can drive the pin out, but you're not going to separate those leaves, not without grossly increasing the gap between the edge of the door and frame. Grossly, like, 5/16 or so. That's going to be quite a challenge on a mortar-packed, metal, frame. So that is the cut sheet that we have, or catalog page. Template. I said we'd look at a document called template. Well, this is also the template pattern. The term template is used 2 different ways. If you're not sure if these hole locations for the screws will match what you have, check it before you buy these. Okay? If it's a half moon circle pattern like this, it's probably going to match just fine. If you go back far enough, you're going to see a zigzag pattern on 4.5 inch hinges. That would be a very old hinge. I don't know when this template pattern was made standard. I would think at least 60 years ago would be my guess. Or, the 1960s would be my guess. You look at a catalog from 1905, you are not going to see a template pattern. That's for sure. This template will apply to different part numbers, and really these hinges are different designs or different construction. Different knuckle combinations, different leaf thicknesses, different base materials, different types of hinges in general. You might have a heavyweight hinge that's going to be here made of stainless steel, but all those part numbers are here. T2714, that's ours. And we can see the S, or the leaf length, here, the S dimension. So we would be here or here, depending on the width of the hinge. Very handy document to be able to look at. Let's look at the cross-reference. This is going to show you your McKinney part number against common competitors. T2714, they have Bombers, Hagers, and Stanleys, and those are certainly all accurate conversions. The ANSI number that's here, if you get a specification and it says, here's the ANSI number that I want for my hinge, that's where you would be able to sort that out. And then I'm assuming you would be able to then know your manufacturer of choice who you'd like to use for that part number. That's the cross-reference. Let's take a look at the catalog. Now this will be simply a far larger document that will be an introduction and a comprehensive view of all things McKinney related. So if we do a find function for T2714, we're going to find all of the instances where it shows up, and here's our cut sheet. But as you get into the catalog and root around in these pages, you're in that section. You'll see, its sister products. You've got the TA version of it. That is a low friction coefficient bearing construction sort of item. The TA2714 is the hinge that you see all the time. I would resist the T2714 because those bearings are really far better suited to a long-lasting, healthy installation. You'll be able to get into concealed bearing construction, TCA. It's a cleaner look, in my opinion. You don't have those two bearing packets here and here like you do here. You're going to be able to get into you're going to be able to get into larger stuff, thicker stuff, different applications. This is a wide throw hinge. We talked about that wide throw formula. By the way, this is called the clearance from here to here. This is the inset. You can see that there's a small dimension from here to here. So now we've been able to put a image, so to speak, with what that looks like. Heavyweight hinges are here. You'll notice 4 bearing packets, and the leaf thickness is heavier as well. It goes from 134 thousandths to 180 thousandths. Suffice it to say, you're going to find everything hinge related from McKinney in this book. And in the beginning of the book, there will be some encyclopedic information about hinges in general, but also about McKinney. They've been in business for several decades, early 20th century to be sure. And those options we had talked about earlier, if you're not sure what that SSF safety feature really looks like, well, there's what it looks like. Got a big hole here, and that stud's going to fit in there when that door is closed. You will see hinges like this with the NRP option, both of them, in airport terminals. See those? I notice those all the time. Okay. Now, there is a link below this video here to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the McKinney products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog here. Other encyclopedic documents around here, product templates, okay? Prior versions of the catalog. Here is a McKinney catalog from 1929. They do not have any T2714s in this catalog. Not that you would expect to see a hinge like that in a catalog from almost 100 years ago. McKinney did a lot of iron-forged hardware, and in North Carolina, obviously a state, really great for tourism, you're going to find a lot of old structures, historic hotels that are going to be chock full of this material. But nonetheless, while McKinney certainly does not make any of this material at all anymore, and there's a couple of companies that at least one I can think of that does. I had a client just pull one of these. I think it wasn't, well, who knows? It was a Yale mortise lock. It could have been McKinney trim from about this time frame. Pull one of these off the door because the thumb turn on the inside of the mortise lock broke, and I implored him to have the thumb turn repaired. You just don't see this material anymore, and was replacing it with a garden variety residential lock from the local home improvement store. Someday it's going to come back in style. Someday. Maybe not, but things do have a tendency to come around. Anyway, an interesting step back in our McKinney time machine. Let's wrap up this video on camera. So as you can see, McKinney's been around for a long, long time. Also, speaking of McKinney, if you encounter any bathroom accessories that say the name McKinney, I know in the 1980s they were into what we would call Division 10 commercial restroom equipment. Maybe until the early 90s at some point, but right in that time it was all discontinued. And very occasionally, 25, 30 plus years later, a client will, hey, I'm looking for a spindle for this McKinney toilet tissue dispenser. Why can't I find these? Well, you'd need a time machine. Speaking of time machines. So if you encounter that, there you go. McKinney is really known as a hinge company. So when you're diving into the world of McKinney, who's under the ASSA ABLOY umbrella, her sister companies would be Medico, Yale, Norton, Sargent, Corbin Russwin, Rockwood, Pemco, Hess, Folgeratom, a complete package of material from that multinational, multi-billion-dollar ASSA ABLOY corporation. Good quality people over at McKinney. I send them a quote request, they send it back, I send them a PO, they send me a confirmation. Just pretty smooth with them. And that is, not all ASSA ABLOY companies are like that, but there are a couple of them that are, most definitely are. And to McKinney, I say thank you very much. Any questions on the T2714 4.5 and a US 10 finish? Pardon me, a US 10B finish? Or what would be more appropriately called 640 finish, oil rubbed over steel? Or any other McKinney product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.